Jaguar Chapter 5, Part 2, starting at the top of page 55. The truck was so loud we could barely hear each other. Doc drove us out of Manius and up into the hills. The roads, if you could call them that, were terrible. The vegetation got thicker and greener the further away from the city we got. Most of this is secondary growth, Doc shouted above the racket. You don't see primary rainforest until you get way up the Amazon. And even then you have to hike in a couple miles from the river, because everything along the shore has been cut at one time or another. Why do they cut it? Firewood, lumber, settlements, oil, gold, you name it. They're gobbling up the rainforest big time. We were in the truck for at least 2 hours before Doc finally came to a stop at what looked like a dead-end road. We got out and looked around. There was no one waiting for us there. This is bad, he said. Flana must have gotten tired of waiting, so she went back into the forest. We'll have to go find her. Want to go for a hike? Sure. I went back to the truck and drank some water from the jug we had brought with us. Doc did the same. The trail's over here. He pushed through the strand of thick green vegetation. It will open up when we get under the canopy. It took us a while to get through the tangled plants. Doc went first. He didn't seem to be following any kind of trail that I could see, but I was confident that he knew what he was doing. He might get confused driving a car or walking in the city, but put him in the middle of nowhere and he could navigate like an animal that had lived there its whole life. When we finally broke through the ground cover, we stopped and looked up. We were surrounded by huge trees. Their massive trunks were wrapped with thick vines. The lowest branches were at least 100 feet above us. Shafts of sunlight battled their way through the canopy to the ground, which was much more open than I had thought it would be. The forest was filled with sounds of animals I couldn't see. It's like a cathedral, I whispered. That's a good description. This is the only untouched rainforest for 100 miles. Relatively untouched. People are beginning to encroach on the outer edges. It's hard to keep them out. We started walking again and continued until we came to a narrow stream. Doc sat down on a rotting log covered with a thick cushion of moss. I sat next to him. I guess I better tell you what's going on, he said. I nodded. He unlaced his boots, peeled his socks off, and let his feet dangle in the water. I'm not exactly sure where to begin. Why don't you start by telling me about the Jaguar project? I suggested, trying to make this as easy as possible for him. It's Bill's project, not mine. I just came down here to help him get it started. It's a little more involved than that now. Translated, he was much happier down here than he was in Poughkeepsie, and he didn't want to go back. Bill has been trying to put together a Jaguar preserve for over 20 years, and it looks like he's about ready to pull it off. Just a couple more hurdles. Such as? It boils down to this. There's a rich industrialist from the States who's getting 1 million acres from the Brazilian government in payment for a debt they owe him. His name's Wolcott. I'd heard that name before. He owned an oil company or something in the States. Anyway, Wolcott loves Jaguars almost as much as he loves money. The government gave him his choice of 1 million acre tract of land. He has a dozen to choose from, and 2 months to decide which one he wants, and more important, what he wants to do with the land. He can either set up a preserve and write off the debt, or he can suck out every last resource in the 1 million acres and leave behind a garbage dump. Of course, his advisors are telling him to go for the garbage dump idea. He'll get all his money back and probably a lot more. But Wolcott's getting older and he doesn't need any more money. This is where Bill comes in. Bill pitched him the Jaguar preserve idea. Wolcott liked it. In fact, he liked it so well that he told Bill to pick one of the tracts of land right on the spot. Bill did. So what's the problem? Bill picked the area without knowing if it would support Jaguars. And the deal is that he has to show reasonable progress within 2 months or Wolcott will pick one of the other sites and suck it dry. How does he define reasonable progress? Wolcott's been kind of vague about that. We know he wants radio-collared Jaguars on the ground and enough tracking data to prove that the spot is a viable location for the preserve. In other words, the preserve has to be up and running within 2 months. I thought about the terrible warehouse they were stuck in, and the old truck they drove, and the decrepit boat they hoped would get them up the Amazon. Who's paying for all this? Bill is. Flana and I have put in money too. We're on a pretty tight budget. Why doesn't Wolcott pay for it? He could probably fund this whole expedition with the change in his pocket. He says he's gone as far as his advisors will let him. If we show progress, he'll not only donate the land, but set up an endowment fund that will pay for operating the preserve. So this is sort of a test or something. That's one way of looking at it. Wolcott is pretty eccentric and impulsive. Just like you, I thought. Where does this leave me? Doc looked away. Not good. I felt the guillotine sliding down the greased grooves toward my neck. I'm not exactly sure, he said. I mean, I've thought a lot about it. That's why I wanted you to come down here. I wanted to talk to you face to face. We might as well get right to it, I thought. I took a deep breath. I think I should stay down here with you, I said. I know. No eye contact. This was not going the way I wanted it to go. But this isn't the best place for you to be right now. We don't know exactly what we're facing upriver, and it could be dangerous. I walked halfway across Kenya looking for you. I think I've proven I can take care of myself. You could have been killed in Kenya. I have enough on my mind without worrying about your safety, to say nothing of the fact that you have school. I knew this excuse was going to come up. Doc, I can't live in a retirement home until I go to college. It won't work. I know. I've been checking into some things. If you can just hang in there until the end of the school year, there's a summer camp in Colorado that... What are you talking about? I shouted, losing my cool completely. I don't want to go to a summer camp. I want to be with you. How long are you staying down here? I'm here for the duration, Doc said quietly. What's that mean? I don't know. What happens in the fall after this so-called summer camp? There are some good boarding schools. I got it from the log and walked away. It was either that or start crying in front of him. How could he do this without even asking? What about what I wanted? I heard Doc call, but I kept walking. I'd figured I'd lose the first round, but I thought I'd at least be able to spend the summer down here with him. He was talking about us being separated for a year or two. He was no longer helping a friend out. This was as much his project as it was Bill's now. Doc's voice got further and further away. He probably wished that now that he hadn't taken his boots and socks off. Having to put them back on had given me a big head start. I found what looked like a trail and followed it. I had no idea where I was going, and I didn't really care. Without any warning, something appeared right in front of me, something large. I couldn't see clearly because my eyes were blurred with tears. I staggered backward, fell on my butt, turned over, and started crawling as fast as I could. Back the way I had come. It had to be some kind of animal. Doc would be sorry now. I'm sorry. I thought you were Bob. I stopped crawling. Wild animals don't usually apologize before they attack you. Bob? It was a woman's voice. I turned around and looked. She had curly red hair sticking out from a yellow hard hat and was hurriedly undoing a climbing harness from her waist. Attached to the harness was a rope that was tied off up in the canopy somewhere. When she got entangled, she ran over to me. I'm so sorry. I stood up and brushed myself off. Who's Bob? Aren't you Jake? I nodded. I was referring to your father. My father, Dr. Robert Lanza, despised being called Bob. Everyone knew this. That's why he adopted the nickname Doc. When my mom was alive, he didn't even let her call him Bob. I stared at the woman. She was about my height and had green eyes. She wore a pair of khaki shorts and a green sleeveless leotard and a pair of heavy climbing boots. She had a slight but very athletic body. In other words, she was beautiful. "I'm Flana Brenna," she said, "the botanist." Right. I had a feeling that she was more than a botanist. I heard Doc running up the path behind me. He stopped when he got to us, slightly out of breath. Flana smiled brightly when she saw him. He smiled back at her. She was definitely more than a botanist. I guess Doc forgot to tell me about this part of the expedition. "I'm afraid I nearly scared your son half to death, Bob. I thought it was you. You look just alike from 100 feet up." "Jake, this is Dr. Flana Brenna." We already introduced ourselves, Bob.